Hello, everyone, and welcome to Along the Way Life's Journey. I'm your host, Carl Buccellato. Well, this is the beginning of our second year. We just completed 2022, which was our premier year, our first year as a podcast. We successfully brought you 52 shows with wonderful, wonderful guests from every walk of life. And I think about 1,000, more than 1,000 subscribers now in place. And I'm very pleased about that. And I've had many, many people write in and ask different questions over the last year. Some of the people ask questions, tell me more about your past. And I have endeavored to do that in a couple of shows. And frankly, as I've said many times before, it's all right there in that book. I wrote that book when I retired a couple of years ago, and it's called To Every Page a Turning, and it reflects life's journey and my life's journey. And I would be happy to talk about more of that in the future if anyone really is interested, and just continue to ask questions, and I'll try and answer them as best as I can. So today, we're not going to have a guest today. I'm going to chat a little bit. We've just come off a New Year vacation. My wife and I, we got out of the house after the pandemic for the first time in 3 years and took a vacation. And we were fortunate enough to go on a cruise to the Caribbean. And it was wonderful in many, many ways. And on that cruise, there were thousands of people and many, many people from across the United States and Canada. And one of the things that became apparent to me while traveling is that everybody has a comment to make and everybody has a story. And as I've said on this show many, many times, everybody has a story. You have a unique story. Tell your story. But this story that became clear to me as we were traveling is a story called America. And that story about America, it made it very clear to me that everybody on that ship, mostly Americans, some Canadians, but people, mostly Americans, speaking out in one form or another about how life has changed, how this country has changed, and how many, many people are unhappy with these changes. So I thought about this quite extensively. And I remembered that some years ago, there was a movie in the 1970s, and it was with Albert Finney. It was called Network. Many of you may not remember that, but there's a very startling scene in Network where this man who is a newspaper reporter who just got sick and tired of the shenanigans and the games people were playing politically and the different government activities going on. And he came to a place where he came out on a balcony, opened the windows, and screamed out to New York, to the world to hear,
"I'm as mad as hell, and I'm not going to take this anymore. I want you to get up right now. Get up, go to your windows, open them, and stick your head out and yell, 'I'm as mad as hell, and I'm not going to take this anymore. Things have got to change.'
How many stations does this go out?
You've got to get mad.
67.
You've got to say,
I know it goes to Louisville and Atlanta.
I'm not going to take this anymore. Then we'll figure out what to do about the depression and the inflation and the oil crisis. But first, get up out of your chairs, open the window, stick your head out and yell, and say, 'I'm as mad as hell, and I'm not going to take this anymore.'"
Well, ironically, that's some of the things that I've heard from people around this country. We've been hearing over and over again over recent years that we are Democrats or we are Republicans or we're independents and we're against each other, or we're whites and then we're black. And the news agencies and the government have set up all these propaganda things to make us think we're different, that we are not the same people. Well, I say that's a lot of nonsense. We are the same people. We're Americans, one and all. We have different opinions, and we have a right to different opinions. But when it boils down to it, we're first and foremost Americans. And Americans have been taught, at least in my generation we've been taught to believe that this is a free country with free speech, with the right to a free and independent press, which we no longer have in this country. I watched a movie last night called Post. And if you haven't watched it in recent times, I encourage you to watch it again. It has to do with the Washington Post and the actions that they took in tandem with the New York Times in the 1970s when the Pentagon Papers came out regarding the information that was leaked out that for four different presidential organizations, four different authorities in the United States, Truman, Eisenhower, Kennedy, Johnson, and then finally with Nixon. They all all knew that the war in Vietnam could not be won. They all knew that we were fighting a senseless, endless battle for nothing. They made it very clear that every one of them knew 10% of it was for the salvation of Southeast Asia and the South Vietnamese people. Only 10% of it. 20% of it had to do with the various different political groups that we were part of across the world and how we were in tandem with or against them. But 70% of the reason that the war continued, and the presidents lied to us one after the next, no matter what their political persuasions were, they lied to the American people. And the 70% of the reason was they didn't want the disgrace of failing and losing the war. So they continued, and they built up more and more forces, and they sent more and more bombers and more destruction. And the end result of it was 53,000 American lives were lost between 1960 and 1974. 53,000 men and women died when our different governments swore to protect us as the American people, when the government knew that we could not win that war. And yet they persisted, and they persisted. And so this New York, in this movie Post, the Washington Post and the New York Times got a hold of these documents, the McNamara papers, and printed them. And they were told by the federal government to cease and desist, and that they would be shut down because they were printing documents that were against the security of the United States. Well, they printed them anyway, and they went to court. And every other paper in the United States got behind them, picked up the documents, and printed them also, with a statement of solidarity saying to the government, the First Amendment would survive.
The press was to serve the governed, not the governors.
The First Amendment, granting the right of free speech and free press, would guarantee that the American people would hear the truth finally. Well, they won that battle in the Supreme Court, and that was the law of the land in the 70s. Well, where are we today? Here we are today with a government that just sent the president, who's been in office for 2 years, down to the border that's been open and streaming with people crossing the border, and criminals and immigrants crossing the border for years and years. Every day we see tens of thousands of people coming through, and the president finally goes to the border. And what does the press show us? Everything cleaned up on the street. People aren't sleeping on the street anymore. Nobody was around him. All he saw was this sanitized picture, which they're reporting back to us now. This is what's happening on the border. Well, do they really believe we are morons in this country? Do they really believe that we don't have eyes to see, that we don't hear and know and understand the truth? Do they really think that because the press says something, we are going to believe it, when the press is working so diligently in tandem with the political organizations to hide everything from us? I don't know about you, but I believe that we have to finally say to this government and finally say to this press, we are Americans first and foremost. Democrats, Republicans, independents, white, black, Christians, Jews, Muslims, whatever we are, whatever we identify first as Americans. And we should get together and stand up and be counted for. And I, for one, think it's time we write letters to every senator and congressman. What a sham this was. The red tide coming through. The Republicans were going to take the majority in the Congress and in the Senate, and they just barely got a majority in the Congress. And they argued among themselves for days to vote a leader in. They've had months to resolve this thing. They argue among themselves to vote a leader in. Is this not the epitome of nonsense, that they can't even agree among themselves who should lead when they supposedly have had this already discussed? How disgusting does it have to get? I say we get a campaign going. We write letters to every senator, every congressman, every editor of every newspaper within our reach, every television news agency, and we tell them, like the man said in Network, we're mad as hell and we've had enough. It's time for you, the government of the United States, to be the representative of the people, not the special interest groups, not the fat cats that go into the Senate with a couple of $100,000 in their pockets and stay for 40 years and come out $80 million in value. It's time for you to recognize you got stop wasting the American dollar, stop wasting the American youth with the disgrace that occurred this year with this pandemic that took kids out of school, that put us so far behind in terms of scholastic capability and so far behind in the well-being and good mental health of our children. We stand way down on the list of countries now, and we should never be way down on the list of anything. This is the strongest country on earth. God created this country with great opportunities, great human resources, great natural resources, and we have accomplished great things in our history. Let us not allow these people to fool us into thinking that we can be shepherded into pens like sheep. It is time for us to speak up. And I hope you agree with me. You know, I've been trying to keep an even keel during this show. I try to make both sides be told. I try to be honest. And as everyone knows, I'm a man of faith. I believe in God. But I also believe that God has told us there's times to stand. We must stand and be counted for. We don't have to be violent, and we shouldn't be violent, but we should be forceful. We should speak out to America, write our letters, write to the senators, write to the congressmen, write to every editor of every newspaper, write to the heads of the news agencies of the various television networks, and let them know that we, the people of the United States, because of a constitution that grants us our rights, we have the right to speak up, and we have the right to be heard. And the next time elections come around, we will speak that power with force, but we will also speak with force against these agencies and companies that think that they can put us down. We have the power of the dollar. We have the power of our wallets. We have the power of our commitments and decisions, which companies we buy from, which companies we don't buy from, which agencies we listen to. And it's time for us as Americans to stand and let the world see us for who we are once again, the greatest nation on earth. So I encourage you, write in, tell me what you think, write in your questions, and if you want to be a guest on the show and you want to debate this in any way, feel free, write it in, tell me who you are, we'll bring you on the show, we'll have discussions. This will be an open forum. I promise you, an open forum. What you need to do is stand up for what you believe in. If you believe in what I'm saying, get behind it, write in, write letters, tell people about this, pass it on. Take this particular message and pass it on to everyone you know, because if we don't stand together, we will certainly fall. And the nation of the United, and this nation, when it stands together, can accomplish anything. We have proven that over the histories of this country. We can accomplish anything. We just need to stand together and believe in one another. So I encourage you, write in. Tell me what you think. If you'd like to be a guest on the show, write in, tell me who you are, tell me how to reach you, and we'll talk about it, and you can be a guest on the show. If you'd like an open forum to debate this, I would be glad to do that. It's time for us to stand and do something. The time to sit by and watch and let them take from us over and over and over again is gone. For our children, for the future of this country. I won't be long around and live long enough to see the grandchildren and great-grandchildren come to their full power as Americans. But many of you will. And we owe it to them. We owe it to the world, because when this country stands firm, it is the strongest symbol of freedom in the history of mankind. We can't let them take it away from us again. So once again, I say to you, we'll be having new shows on Wednesday mornings, and it won't always be this rant and rave. I realize I'm a little emotional about it, but after living through what I saw and so many people speaking out, it's time for us to join them. Good day for now. and love somebody today.